I moved every dollar of my savings into an account only I could touch. 4 hours later, my daughter-in-law was pounding on my porch, screaming like I had stolen from her. But she wasn't scared for me. She was furious because the money she had already planned to use was suddenly out of reach. That day, I learned the truth when someone calls control help. Your first boundary may be the only thing that saves you. By the time Chloe reached my porch that afternoon, the decision had already been made. But before the shouting, before the neighbors looked out their windows, everything still felt strangely quiet. The decision itself felt incredibly simple. I stood at the kitchen counter, pouring a fresh cup of coffee, enjoying the absolute stillness of my own home. My name is Clara. I am 68 years old, and I have lived in this house for 3 decades. I didn't wake up wanting a fight. I simply woke up knowing I was done being a guest in my own life. For weeks, I had felt someone else slowly deciding where everything belonged, including me. The subtle shifts started a few months ago when my son, David, married Chloe. I love my son. He is kind, but he has always been passive, easily swayed by whoever speaks the loudest. Chloe did not always need to raise her voice to take control. Sometimes she did it with a soft laugh, a helpful suggestion, or a sentence that made me feel old before I had even answered. I first noticed it when they started coming over for Sunday dinners. Chloe would rearrange my kitchen cabinets without asking, claiming my layout was inefficient. Then, she started questioning my grocery receipts, leaving them spread out on the dining table with a sigh. She told David I was spending too much on premium brand coffee and garden supplies. She framed it as concern. "I'm just trying to make things easier for you," she would say. Every crossed line became help. I didn't cry about it. I didn't complain to David. I just watched her behavior, recognizing a boundary being pushed, inch by inch. I saw her eyes lingering on the mail I left on the hall table, specifically the envelopes from my bank. Yesterday, I found her holding my spare house key, casually mentioning she should keep it permanently, just in case of emergencies. I didn't argue. I just smiled, took the key back from her hand, and slipped it into my pocket. That small act was the beginning. I knew I had to act before her assumptions became a reality. I finished my coffee, grabbed my leather purse, and prepared for my daily errands. The week before the bank visit, Chloe walked in carrying 2 boxes of office supplies, while David trailed behind her, silent and apologetic. "Clara, we figured since you never used the guest room, it would make a perfect home office for me," she announced. She didn't phrase it as a question. I stood by the staircase, watching my son avoid eye contact. I did not raise my voice, nor did I block her path. I simply followed her upstairs. She was already opening the closet, casually pushing my winter coats to one side. "This will be so much more efficient," Chloe said, turning to me with a bright, tight smile. "And we can help you keep an eye on the house." I looked at her, then at David. "You are welcome to visit," I said evenly, keeping my posture relaxed but firm. "But the guest room is staying exactly as it is. It is not an office." Chloe's smile faltered. "But Clara, it's just sitting there. You're being impractical. Families share resources. It is my home," I replied softly. I stepped forward, picked up the smaller of the 2 boxes, and handed it back to my son. "David, please put this back in your car." He blinked, startled by the direct instruction, and immediately took the box. Chloe stared at me, her jaw tightening. She wasn't used to hearing the word no from me at all. I watched them leave, knowing she wouldn't give up. She would just change her daily tactics very soon. Since the guest room incident, Chloe shifted her focus from my physical space to my finances. It happened over a seemingly innocent Sunday brunch. She poured me a glass of orange juice and sighed heavily. You know, Clara, inflation is getting worse. David and I were looking over our budget, and it made us worry about you. I took a sip of my juice. I appreciate the concern, but I am perfectly fine. Chloe leaned forward, resting her elbows on the dining table. Well, older people often lose track of subscription fees and changing utility rates. I was thinking I could link your primary checking account to my financial app, just to monitor it for you. No pressure, just for safety. The word safety sounded gentle, but the request was not gentle at all. It would put her between me and every dollar I had earned. It would turn my savings into something she could observe, question, and eventually direct. David nodded eagerly. It actually is a really great app. 8. Mom, Chloe manages all our bills with it. It saves us a lot of headaches. I looked at my son. He genuinely believed he was helping. Chloe, however, was clearly just testing the deep waters. If I gave her access to my checking account, she would see my savings, my pension, and my investments. The transition from monitoring to managing would be incredibly swift. I set my glass down quietly. I didn't act offended or start a long argument about trust. I gave her a practical, flat refusal. No, thank you, Chloe. My system works perfectly well for me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you sure I noticed you still write physical checks for the landscaping service? It's a bit outdated. Clara, what if you make a mistake? If I make a mistake, I will fix it, I said, picking up my fork. We don't need to discuss my finances again. Chloe gave a patient little smile. The kind people use when they believe they are the only adult in the room. I just don't want you making decisions when you're overwhelmed, she said. I looked at her carefully. I had balanced a household, buried a husband, paid off a mortgage, and raised a son. But somehow, in Chloe's version of my life, I had become someone who needed supervision. The rest of the meal was uncomfortably quiet. Chloe barely touched her food. I ate my entire meal, slowly enjoying the warm, roasted potatoes. I knew then that waiting was no longer an option. I needed to formally secure everything immediately tomorrow morning. Monday morning, I called a locksmith. David had held a spare key for years, but lately, Chloe was the one using it. By 9:30, the front and back locks were changed, and 3 new keys sat on my kitchen counter. I did not call David to explain. I owned the house. Securing it was not a family discussion. My next step was quieter. I sat at my desk and opened the grocery app I had been avoiding. 3 separate receipts were there, each one carrying items I had never ordered. Imported wine, steak cuts I did not eat, cleaning supplies for an apartment I did not live in. I printed them one by one and placed them inside a plain folder. Then I opened the drawer where I kept my bank letters. 2 envelopes had already been slit open before I ever touched them. I remembered Chloe saying, "I sorted those for you," as if sorting my mail gave her ownership of what was inside it. That was when I understood something I had been trying not to name. The problem was not one purchase. It was not one key. It was the slow way she had made me feel embarrassed for asking questions about my own life. By noon, the quiet house felt entirely mine again. The heavy locks were changed. The folder of receipts was in my purse, and only one boundary remained. I grabbed my keys, locked the front door, and drove to the bank. The local bank was quiet when I walked in. Sarah, the branch manager, recognized me immediately. I placed my identification on her desk. I need to open a new checking and savings account, sole ownership, then transfer every dollar from my current accounts into the new ones. Do you want to close the old accounts entirely? She asked. Yes, I said. and no one else gets access. Only me. Understood, Sarah said, typing rapidly. She printed out the paper forms and slid them across the desk. I read every line carefully before signing my name. There was no hesitation in my hand. I was moving the safety net I had built over 40 years out of reach of anyone who might view it as their own. It took less than 30 quick minutes. Sarah handed me a new debit card and a folder with my updated account numbers. All set. Clara. The old accounts are officially closed. The funds are secure in your name. I thanked her, put the folder in my purse, and walked out into the afternoon sun. I didn't feel guilty for hiding my hard-earned money. I felt responsible for protecting it. I drove home in total silence, listening to the steady, comforting hum of my car engine. I did not know exactly how closely Chloe had been watching my balance, but I knew this much. If she noticed the old account had been emptied before I said a word, it would tell me everything I needed to know. It took exactly 4 short hours. I was in the backyard, watering my tomato plants, when I heard the aggressive crunch of tires on my driveway. A heavy car door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the windows. I placed the watering can on the grass and walked slowly toward the front of the house. Chloe was already standing on my porch. Her face flushed red with absolute fury. She had her phone clutched in her hand, the screen glowing brightly. "How dare you!" She screamed the second I came around the corner. She didn't care that the nearby neighbor's windows were completely open. She lost it right on my porch. "You closed the accounts. The card linked to the grocery app stopped working and the payment bounced. Where is the money?" Clara. I stopped at the very bottom of the wooden porch steps, keeping a comfortable physical distance. I did not match her volume. I looked at her directly in the eyes. "I moved my savings to a safe account," I said calmly. "And my checking." Chloe's chest was heaving heavily. "Without telling David, without telling me we are supposed to be managing this together, you can't just hide your assets from us. They are not your assets." "Chloe," I replied smoothly, "they are my life savings. I earned them. I decide where they go." She looked toward the street, suddenly aware that her anger had an audience. Then she looked back at me with the same entitlement she had carried into my guest room. My mail and my bank statements. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, waving her phone. I was setting up a joint investment account for the family. The advisor needed to see that balance before approving the plan. "You just ruined months of careful planning." That one sentence did more than all her shouting. She had not come because she was worried about me. She had come because my money had already been placed inside a plan I had never agreed to. I stood perfectly still on the grass. The truth was finally out in the open. She hadn't just been snooping. She had been actively trying to leverage my money for her own financial gain, all without my permission. The audacity was breathtaking, but I wasn't shocked. I had mentally prepared for exactly this moment, and I had my firm, calm answer ready. Chloe stood frozen on the porch, waiting for me to quickly back down or apologize. She expected me to crumble under the pressure of her anger. Instead, I walked up the steps, unlocked my newly secured front door, and turned around to face her. "You plan to invest my money without asking me?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low. "I was going to tell you," she snapped, stepping forward. "It was going to benefit all of us. David agreed that your money was just sitting there doing nothing." Hearing my son reduced to a permission slip hurt more than her yelling. Not because I believed he understood the full plan, but because I knew he had chosen comfort over courage again. "David absolutely does not own my money," I said. "And neither do you." I slowly pulled my phone from my pocket and looked at her. "I know about the grocery bills." "Chloe." She completely froze. The anger in her eyes flickered, replaced by a sudden, sharp panic. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "I know that when you managed my grocery orders last month, you added $200 of your own household items to my receipt: premium steaks, expensive wine, and cleaning supplies for your apartment. You paid for it using my saved credit card on the app." Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I also know," I continued, "that you tried to get in before you came here. My neighbor saw you using David's old spare key, but when I told her why I moved the money, her face went completely white. I moved it because somewhere along the way, asking about my own money started to feel like an accusation. And because you crossed from helping into taking, Chloe, a very polite, organized kind of taking, hidden behind the word family. The loud, demanding woman from 30 seconds ago vanished. She finally understood that I had seen every move she made. I waited for her to speak. Before Chloe could formulate an excuse, another car pulled up. It was David. He practically jumped out of his vehicle, looking frantic. Chloe must have called him in a panic when she couldn't access the new bank account. "Mom! Chloe!" David rushed quickly up the concrete walkway, his eyes darting between us. "What is going on?" "Chloe called me crying at work." Chloe immediately shifted her posture, trying hard to look small and intensely victimized. "David, your mother is locking us out of her life. She moved all her money and called me a thief." David looked at me. His shoulders slumped forward in that overly familiar, passive way. "Mom, please. Why are you doing this? Chloe was just trying to help you organize things. We just want you to be safe." "Safe?" I repeated. "David, I buried your father. I paid this house off. I handled every hard season this family survived. I did not lose my mind just because Chloe learned how to sound helpful." I looked at my son. I deeply felt a wave of sadness, but I did not let it soften my resolve. "David, I am perfectly safe. The only thing threatening my stability was your wife." "Mom, that's not fair," he pleaded, running a hand through his hair. I reached deeply into my pocket, pulled out the grocery receipt I had printed earlier, and handed it to him. "Read the highlighted items. David, then ask your wife why she charged her expensive groceries to my card without asking." David looked at the receipt. His tired eyes scanned the paper, and his expression shifted from confused to deeply embarrassed. He looked up at Chloe, who was suddenly very interested in staring intently at her own shoes. "Chloe, oh, did you do this?" he asked quietly. She tightly crossed her arms defensively. "It was a mistake. The cards got mixed up on the app. It happened 3 times. David, not once. 3 separate orders." I stated firmly. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The cold facts spoke entirely for themselves. I calmly looked at both of them. Standing together on my porch, realizing the dynamic of our relationship had permanently shifted, David stood completely silently on the wooden porch, holding the receipt. For the first time in his life, he couldn't find a way to smooth things over. "Mom, I had no idea," he finally whispered. "I know you didn't," I replied, "because you let her handle everything so you wouldn't have to deal with the discomfort. But my life is not yours to manage. I agreed to accept help when I needed it." I said, "I did not agree to disappear inside someone else's version of what my life should be. I love you, David. You are always my son. But things are going to be different now." I looked at Chloe. No financial access, no spare key, no guest room office. If you want to visit, you call first. You do not walk in, sort my mail, or offer financial advice unless I ask. "You're treating us like strangers," Chloe muttered bitterly. "I am treating you like adult guests," I corrected her. This is my home. This is my money. I earned the right to peace, and I will not apologize for enforcing it. David nodded slowly. He looked completely exhausted, finally burdened by the reality of his wife's actions. I understand. Mom, we should go. He turned to Chloe and gently touched her arm. Come on, Chloe. Let's go home. She didn't argue. She turned around and walked briskly to her car, getting in and loudly slamming the door. David lingered for a brief, quiet second. I'm sorry. Mom, I know. I said gently. I'll see you when you're ready to visit respectfully. I watched them both drive away down the street, feeling incredibly light. The house was quiet that evening. I made dinner, poured a glass of wine, and watched the sunset without second-guessing myself. The next morning, I made coffee, sorted my own mail, and checked my secure bank balance. I had not taken back my life through a dramatic courtroom scene or some grand act of revenge. I had taken it back by doing ordinary things I should never have been made to fear. I paid my own bills. I opened my own mail. I checked my own balance without wondering who would question me for it. A few days later, David called. He did not ask for money. He did not defend Chloe. He simply said, Mom, I should have listened sooner. I told him, yes, you should have. That was not cruelty. That was honesty. Chloe did not apologize right away. People like Chloe rarely do when control is first taken from them, but she stopped walking into my house like it belonged to her. She stopped touching my mail. She stopped using the word family as a key to doors I had finally learned to lock. There is a lesson I carried out of all this. Help should never require you to surrender your voice. Boundaries are not punishments. They are how you stay whole. I did not move my savings to hurt my son or humiliate his wife. I moved them because I remembered who I was before I started asking permission to live peacefully in my own home. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about family, boundaries, and quiet strength. I did not lose my family that day. I found my footing again, and this time, I was not willing to give it back.